Hey there, and welcome to another book review. I know it's been a while since my last one, not since the last book I read, just since the last review, but I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. I had to turn off my AC so you could hear me, and I am sweltering in this New York City heat wave. So today's book review is I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons by Peter S. Beagle. He is the author of The Last Unicorn. So the way I got to this book was I was in the bookstore and I was working on a short story that actually has a unicorn as its protagonist. And I was like, hey, I remember there was a book. No, I remembered the movie, The Last Unicorn. I was like, hey, I think that was actually based on a book. So I Googled it and I was like, yes, it is based on a book. So I looked it up and they had it in store. And then I was like, I don't want to read this book while I'm writing about a unicorn because I don't want my writing to be overly influenced by how this author does their unicorns. But then I saw he had one about dragons and I love dragons. So I picked up this book. So the back of the book, the jacket reads, dragons are common in the backwater kingdom of Belmontagne, coming in sizes from mouse-like vermin all the way up to the fabled kings, which haven't been seen in an age. Gaius Aurelius Constantine Heliogabalus Thrax, who would much rather people call him Robert, has recently inherited his deceased father's job as a dragon exterminator, a career he detests with all his heart. Things turn from bad to worse when Robert is hired by the royal family to disinfest the entire castle, as Princess Cerise is determined to receive Crown Prince Reginald with the shabby chateau looking its best. What happens next is not the fairy tale you may be expecting. When I tell you that I inhaled this book from the very first lines. So the first line reads, the warning came in the form of a great wind, sudden and cold, sweeping out of the western mountains on a perfectly bland and cloudless summer day. And it made me think about my writers group because we had this conversation about opening lines, and one young lady was like, how do you write that opening sentence? Like, how do you make it so beautiful? How do these famous first lines that we hear about or the first lines in the books that we read, how do they capture us? And we were talking about it, we were thinking about it, and I was like, I don't know if it's so much about the line as it is the moment. Like, it's not so much that you're trying to craft perfect grammar, perfect syntax, perfect use of an adjective or whatnot, but you are trying to hook your reader in a moment, in an action, in the immediacy of the start of your story. And that is kind of what determines how that first sentence is crafted. And I feel like that's kind of almost a nuance, but this had me in those first lines. And I don't annotate my books, partly because I like the purity of unmarked books, but I'm starting to feel like I should if I'm going to keep doing book reviews. But in any case, one of the things I liked most about this book is it subverted the fairy tale trope, just like it says, all across the board, right? The princess is usually this damsel in distress that needs to be saved by a prince. A prince is this dashing kind of knight in shining armor who is excited to go on adventure and slay dragons. And, and Robert, the main character, is just this, random peasant, so to speak, who's an exterminator, but he exterminates dragons of all things. And this idea of dragons, not just being those huge, beautiful, mythical creatures that we think of, but, teeny tiny like mice or, even as small as, rats or roaches or who knows what. This idea that they're that common too. I just thought was, super clever. And I don't know if I read The Last Unicorn like years and years and years ago, but I'm kind of obsessed with Peter S. Beagle's writing. It's fun and it's kind of light, and there's a humor that he kind of instills as you go on this journey. But the way in which he is able to take kind of this common trope and turn it upside down on its head is like truly, truly great. All of the characters are, pretty well developed. He has a family, has two sisters, a couple brothers. The brothers you don't really see that much. You see the sisters a little bit more And he has a mom. His father has passed away. That's, it says it on the jacket, so it's not a spoiler. And then he has a young man who works with him in the extermination business. And then there's this village girl who it's unclear whether she works with them or is just friends with them. But basically by the end of this, no one is who you expect them to be by the role that they are playing, right? You don't expect Robert to be where he is, or Crown Prince Reginald to be where he is. And what you see in Robert at the beginning of the book that you understand by the end just makes so much sense. And there's an aspect of like kind of the chosen one to this. There's a lot of like resistance to the call, right? In this, and even when he eventually accepts it, like it doesn't go how you think it would go in any way, shape, or form. As I already said, the princess, and what's so interesting is like in this world, it's the women, the girls who are taught to read and not the men. So in like one of the opening scenes, Robert is like peering over his sister's shoulder as she's like reading something because he's kind of taught himself, but he doesn't get taught in the normal course of things. And I'm like, oh, how refreshing that it's not like the men of letters who are all, learned while the women have to flounder. And yet on the opposite side, the princess doesn't know how to read, right? She's had to teach herself. And that comes into play later on in the book in a pretty funny way that I'm not going to share. It's not so much that it's a spoiler. It's just one of the fun parts of the book that I, don't want to give up. But like, again, like I said, I devoured this book in a week, which for me is kind of fast because I really only read on my commute to and from work. I spent most of my Saturday reading the rest of this book. I did not want to put it down. I was like, I need to know what happened. And again, just the treatment of the dragons, I think is so, so cool in this. And yeah, there's magic in the land, but it's very accessible. It's not super complicated. It gives you just enough to kind of understand that there are rules, etc., but without leaving you asking like, well, why does this work or why doesn't that work? And it doesn't drop in a whole lot of extemporaneous information. But this one, I kind of feel like I'm rambling. Again, I think it's the heat, but all I can say is that this book was super, super good. All of the primary characters, even Mortmain, who is Crown Prince Reginald's kind of valet, but a little bit more than a valet, loved his character too. There's this great moment between him and the Belmontane's Chamberlain, the castle Chamberlain. This like dance they do back and forth. Again, that would be a spoiler, but it's like, it's so clever and so well done, and the writing is just so, so good. So I would definitely recommend this. The Last Unicorn is going to be soon up on my list, but again, I have to wait until I finish my own short story, so I'm not unduly influenced. But if you're looking for a good, super quick read that is funny, but also has some really poignant moments and, examines this idea of like royalty and nobility and family responsibility and living up to expectations and, dreaming of lives other than what have been set before you, then this is the book for you. I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons by Peter S. Beagle. I hope you enjoy it.